Hello, everyone. Okay, we are going to start Jack's Run. When I sent it out, it looked like there was a number of people that either sometimes are watching them, sometimes not following along with the book. And in general, there was more people that wanted to start the sequel than necessarily reading or starting another book. After I finish this book, though, I will send that kind of survey back out again. And we will likely be starting a different book then, because this one won't quite take us, well, I hope it's not going to take us till the end of the year. I don't know what the end of the year is really going to look like. So we'll keep reading and doing read alouds as long as we can and see where it honestly ends up from there. So, on that note, this book is called Jack's Run. So last one was Zach's Lie. This one's Jack's Run. Now, if you remember, Jack is Zach's original name. So now it's back to his name, although is it? Because we ended that everyone knows who they were, so they need to be put back into the witness protection program. They got on the plane that was actually kind of under arrest and serving its time. It was like Alonzo's plane. And they got onto the plane, and as they're about to take off, one of the captains of the plane, or the co-pilot, looked very similar to their dad. So where does this all end up? So let's read the back cover, and then we'll read the front cover, and then we'll keep going. So, what about Caitlin? Mac asked. Did she ever write me back? After they left Elko, the Marshals allowed him to write a letter to her, censored, of course, and nothing like the letter he really wanted to send. Mac, Doris said gently, the Osborns and Grangers have no return address. I know it's hard, but you really need to forget about what happened in Elko and before. You need to move on with the life you have now. The problem is, Mac thought, I can't. I left my life back in Elko with Caitlin Christabel, but he couldn't tell Doris that. He couldn't tell anybody. So, in the cover here, when Jack Osborne's father was arrested for drug trafficking, he agreed to tell the authorities everything he knew about his ex-boss, the ruthless drug czar, Alonzo Asnar. But betraying a man as powerful as Alonzo has consequences. The Osbornes have spent the last year in hiding, forced to take on new identities and live under the close surveillance of the witness security program. With his trial date fast approaching, Alonzo intensifies his hunt for Jack's family. One slip up and Alonzo will find them, making sure no Osborne survives to testify against him. Jack has messed up once before, and he won't do it again. Unfortunately, someone else in the family hasn't been as careful. So what does that lead us to? What does that mean? Well, let's read and find out. So it starts with that letter. Dear Caitlin, this is the letter I wanted to send you, but didn't. So remember, this is the one that he couldn't actually send, but, he's a journaler, so he wrote it somewhere. This is the letter I wanted to send you, but couldn't. My real name is Jack Osborne. A year ago, my dad was arrested and put in jail for drug trafficking. 3 men broke into our house and threatened to kill my sister, mom, and me. If my dad didn't keep his mouth shut about the drug cartel he was flying for. The head of the cartel was a man named Alonzo Asnar. He was one of the 3 men who broke into our house that horrible night. Dad told the Drug Enforcement Agency that he would give them the information they needed to take Alonzo down in exchange for keeping us safe. When Dad worked for Alonzo, he kept a diary detailing every aspect of Alonzo's drug operation. Our names were changed, we were put into the witness security program run by the U.S. Marshals Service, and sent to Elko, Nevada to start a new life. As you know, Alonzo Asnar found us in Elko. Thanks to Sam Sebasta, Alonzo is in jail now, awaiting trial. But our problems aren't over. He still has people out looking for us, in Dad's diary. We're the Greens now, Robert and Melanie and their 2 kids, Christine and Mac. Not a day goes by when I don't think of you, Kat. My biggest fear is not Alonzo Asnar. It's the possibility that I'll never see you again. I can't send this letter to you yet, but one day, when it's safe, I'll put a stamp in the upper right-hand corner and give it to the postman. It'll be the happiest day of my life. Love, Jack. Day 1. The Greens. The phone rang, but Mac did not get up to answer it. He was lying in bed, a breeze was blowing through the screened-in porch, and he was feeling comfortable for the first time in 24 hours. It wasn't so much the heat that bothered him in Manteo, it was the humidity, sticky, cloying, like swimming through warm chicken broth. The Greens had moved to Manteo in November. The weather was fine throughout winter and spring, but when school let out in June, the heat wrapped Roanoke Island in a shroud of perpetual humidity. The only relief came between 5 and 8 o'clock in the morning, when an Atlantic breeze blew in from the Outer Banks. The best place to catch the breeze was in the screened-in porch overlooking their backyard. At first, Mac's mother was not thrilled with the idea of her son sleeping on the porch. Not enough security, she insisted. Too dangerous. But after a couple weeks of Mac's complaining, she gave in. The phone continued to ring. They had an answering machine, but his father had forgotten to switch it on when he left for work. Whoever was calling wanted to talk to someone, but Mac knew that someone was not him. He had been in Manteo 8 months and still didn't know anyone well enough to give him his family's unlisted phone number. The last time he had made a friend, she had nearly been killed. He figured he'd have plenty of time for friends in fall when he started 8th grade. By then he would know the fate of Alonzo Aznar. He would know if it was safe. The phone was still ringing. He sat up and looked at his watch. 5 after 8. He knew it wasn't his mother. She and Christine were in Los Angeles, which was 3 hours behind East Coast time, and neither one of them were early risers. It wouldn't be one of his father's customers with a leaky toilet or a broken window pane either. He used his cell phone for his handyman calls. But it could be Dad trying to reach me, he thought. Swinging his legs out of bed, he knows there isn't a chance in a million I'll have my cell phone turned on. Mac didn't know where his cell phone was or if the battery was charged. There was no point in carrying a cell phone if you didn't have anyone to call. He walked into the kitchen and picked up the phone. Hello? Mac? It was Doris Welty. I didn't wake you, did I? Kind of, he said. So how's everything going? Good. Doris was a U.S. Marshal. She and her partner, Donald Smites, were their handlers. It was their job to protect the greens of Manteo, North Carolina, which had not worked out very well when they were in the Grangers of Elko, Nevada. No bad guys hanging around, she asked? People giving off weird vibes? Any funny feelings? Mac had plenty of funny feelings these days, but he wasn't about to share them with Doris. Sixth Sense stuff? She asked. She and Don were constantly talking about the Sixth Sense stuff. If you think you're being followed or watched, Don had told him, you probably are. No, Mac said, no sixth sense. The truth was, he didn't have this sense that they were always harping about. I understand you and your dad are batching it, Doris said. Right, Mac verified, seeing that his father had left him a note on the counter. I'll pick you up at 6 for some blue crab at the beach, Dad. How's your dad's business, Doris asked. Good, how's Don? He's on vacation, Doris answered. Speaking of which, what are you doing this summer? Helping Dad a couple days a week. Hanging around. I might spend some time with Christine in Los Angeles before school. Unless I can talk my parents out of it, he thought. Your mom and sister are having a ball in L.A., Doris said. I talked to them last night. Mac understood now. This was an official call. Doris was letting him know that she was keeping tabs on them. The Marshals were not the only ones doing this. Agent Pelton, the drug enforcement agent who had arrested his father, called once or twice a week. So did the prosecuting attorneys who were trying to convict Alonzo Aznar. The calls were patched through the Marshal's office in Washington, D.C. No one but Doris and Don knew where the Osborns were living or who they had become. What's going on with Alonzo, he asked. The question was followed by a long pause. Mac knew that Doris was not comfortable discussing Alonzo with him, which is exactly why he asked the question. Oh, she said finally, you don't need to worry about him anymore. Mac rolled his eyes, and he was tempted to tell her that if that was the case, why were the Greens in the witness security program? That's not what I meant, he said. Is the trial on schedule? I'm a marshal, not a federal prosecutor, she said. You should ask your dad about that. Mac glanced at the calendar on the refrigerator. There was a red question mark on Wednesday for the week after next, and a red line drawn through the next several weeks. He had noticed them for the first time the night before. We've talked about it, he said, which wasn't even close to the truth. The trial starts in a couple of weeks. Again, Doris hesitated, then said, Really? Mac was not the only one fiddling with the truth. The same date was marked on Doris's desk calendar. We are wondering if it's going to be delayed again, he said, as if he and his father had talked about it just that morning over breakfast. I don't think so, Doris said, giving in. Wednesday's the start of the pre-trial stuff. Arguments, preliminary motions, jury selection, things like that. Your dad's part won't start for a while. Why did the trial get delayed so many times? Mac asked. It seems to me that Alonzo would want to try and get out of jail as quickly as he can. First of all, Mac, he's not going to get out. He and his attorneys know this. Right now he's being kept in a federal holding facility in Atlanta, Georgia, which is posh compared to where he will be sent once he's convicted. As the accused, Alonzo is afforded certain comforts that aren't available inside federal penitentiary. He is delaying the inevitable, but his time is about up. Mac sat down at the table, happy now that he had decided to answer the phone. In 10 minutes, he had learned more about what's going on with Alonzo Aznar than he had in the previous 8 months. His parents refused to talk about Alonzo with Mac and his sister Christine. The reasoning was that they wanted them to forget what had happened, or what might happen, and concentrate on being the Green kids from Manteo, North Carolina. Christine, the actress, had no problem with this. She had made a pile of new friends and finished her senior year in high school without a hitch, as his mother proudly put it. Playing Christine Green was just another acting role for her. For Mac, the adjustment had not been quite so smooth. He had a few hitches. He could not quite forget that Alonzo Aznar had tried to kill him twice. He couldn't stop wondering what had happened to Sam Sebasta, the custodian and former Russian spy who had saved his life. Or Caitlin Cristobal, especially Kat, who he had not even had a chance to talk to before they left Elko. What does Kat think of me now, he thought for the 1000th time. What do her parents think of me? Will I be able to talk to her after this is all over? Mac and Caitlin's relationship had just gotten started when Alonzo came to Elko looking for his father's diary. Alonzo had kidnapped Caitlin and threatened to kill her if Mac didn't turn it over to him. Mac? Doris said. Are you there? Yeah, sorry. Doris laughed. I'll let you go. I just called to check in and see how you're doing. Wait, he said. I have a couple more questions. Have you heard from Sam? Who? Sam Sebastia, the custodian? Right, he thought. Sam is no more custodian than you are, Doris. He had only captured Alonzo and Elko. He had also saved the diary, which was the only thing that was keeping his father out of jail. Yeah, Mac said. The guy who caught Alonzo and saved my life. No, Doris said. There would be no reason for him to get in touch with us. Why? I was just wondering. I mean, after what he did to Alonzo, I guess I'm just worried about him. I'm sure Alonzo has more important things to think about than the custodian at your old school. What about Caitlin, he asked. Did she ever write me back? After they left Elko, the Marshals allowed him to write a letter to her. Censored, of course, and nothing like the letter he really wanted to send. Mac, Doris said gently, the Osborns and the Grangers have no return address. I know it's hard, but you really need to forget about what happened in Elko and before. You need to move on with the life you have now. The problem is, Mac thought, I can't. I left my life in Elko with Caitlin Cristobal. But he couldn't tell Doris that. He couldn't tell anybody. Christine Green was beautiful, outgoing, talented, and like her father, able to make friends wherever she happened to be. Los Angeles, California was no exception. On the flight to the West Coast, she had met a successful screenwriter and a documentary producer. Both of them had given her their phone numbers with a promise to help her if she needed anything. She and her mother thought it would take 2 or 3 weeks to find her a place to live, but it only took 2 days. It turned out that the screenwriter she met knew someone who lived near the university and was looking for a roommate. Hannah Vernon was an aspiring actress like Christine, but a few years older. They hit it off as soon as they met, and the next day Christine and her mother moved into Hannah's 3-bedroom bungalow on a quiet street with a lemon tree in the backyard. Finding a space so quickly was a huge relief for Melanie Green. She wanted her daughter to be completely settled before Mac came out to stay. The prosecutors had predicted the trial could last for weeks, perhaps months. During that time, the Greens would be very exposed. Alonzo's people would know where they were. I don't think he'd try anything, Agent Pelton had said. But you never know with Alonzo. He's nuts. If he goes to prison, he has nothing to lose. It would be best to keep the kids out of the picture with someone you trust. There were plenty of people they trusted when they were the Osborns, family members, old friends. But the Greens had no family and no close friends. And even if there were someone to watch the kids, what would Melanie tell them? Thanks for taking the children. By the way, keep a close eye on homicidal drug dealers. If they get in your house, they'll kill everyone there. No. The only solution was to send Mac to stay with his sister. Mac would arrive in LA just before the trial. They hadn't told him yet that his stay would be longer than he expected. Mac had grown a little unpredictable after Elko, and Melanie didn't know how he would react to the news. He was no longer her easygoing son of the year before. The first thing he had asked her for when they got to Manteo was exercise equipment and a place to work out. Before this, exercise was something they had to force him to do. He would much rather have had a book in his hands than a barbell. He approached his workouts with almost a religious fever, never missing a day, even when he was sick. He had always been tall for his age, but now with the weight training, he was way buff, as Christine would say. Melanie hardly recognized him anymore, but the change went deeper than muscle tone. Before Elko, she always knew where she stood with Mac, because he would tell you in very plain English. Since moving to Manteo, he had become a lot more reserved, speaking up only when asked a specific question, and sometimes not even then. In spite of finding a place for Christine quickly, Melanie still had a lot to do. They had to register Christine at UCLA, where she was going to major in film with a minor in music. They had to buy an inexpensive car for her to get around in. They had to enroll in a health club so Mac could continue his workouts. And the final chore was to check out the local schools for Mac, in case the trial continued into the fall, which she hoped would not be the case. The morning before she was to leave for Manteo, Melanie sat in the bungalow's kitchen with Christine, eating what might be their last meal alone together for some time. Hannah was out running errands, which allowed them to speak freely, something they couldn't do when Hannah was there. "Are you sure you're all right with Max coming out here?" she asked. "Where else can you send him?" Christine said. "Besides, I won't mind having him here. We get along most of the time. And Hannah thinks it'll be fun. She has a little brother back in Ohio about Max's age. She misses him." "Even if the trial goes longer than expected?" Melanie asked. "You'll have to get him enrolled in school. Make sure he gets his homework done, drive him around, enforce curfews." Christine laughed. "Knowing Mac, he'll be trying to enforce a curfew on me and make me do my homework. Don't worry, between Hannah and me, we'll be able to handle Mac. In fact, he might even like it out here." "I hope you're right." "Have you told him about the plan?" "Not exactly," Melanie said. "I mean, he knows he's coming out here, but we haven't told him his stay might be longer than he thinks. I spoke with Dad just last night, and he promised to tell him over dinner tonight." "He's not going to be happy," Christine said. "I know." Robert had told Melanie something else during their phone conversation, and now seemed like the best time to tell Christine. "If I can get a flight," she said, "I'm going to head back to Manteo tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Christine said, surprised. "I thought the trial wasn't for a couple of weeks." "It's not," Melanie said. "At least our part. One of the prosecutors called, along with Agent Pelton, and said that we might be able to have to get down to Georgia early to help with pretrial motions. They want us close by in case they need us." She hesitated. "I think, and this is totally up to you, it would be best for Mac to come out here as soon as possible. That way you, your dad, and I can have a few days to get ready without worrying about what to do with Mac." "When?" Christine asked. "Again, it's totally your decision. But the easiest thing for us would be to put him on an outbound flight when I fly into Norfolk. It would save us 4 or 5 hours getting him back up to the airport. But if you need more time to get settled here, we'll understand." Christine thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "Send him out," she said. "The only thing you and Dad need to worry about is making sure Alonzo Aznar goes to prison forever." That's where we are going to stop for today and come back tomorrow. We will continue. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.